So, Roger, I mean, in fairness, this being episode 37, we have mentioned movies from the 80s quite a bit, and people will think that we believe the 80s was the best decade for movie makers and film goers. But the 90s weren't so bad, in particular when you consider the work of David Fincher, and in particular today's movie, The Game.
The Game, yeah. And David Fincher as well. I mean, he did Seven, didn't he? And
It
Fight
did, yeah.
Club.
It did
Yeah.
seven, was it just before The Game? Yeah, and Fight Club came afterwards, so The Game is in between Seven and Fight Club, yeah.
Now, The Game, Pascal, I remember, it's one of those movies that I've not watched that often, so rewatched it this week to prepare for this episode, and it's just a great film, and I could see elements of Seven in it as I was watching, and I've seen Seven a lot more than I've seen The Game, but the attention to detail, the cinematography is just incredible in this film. But it stars Michael Douglas, and I don't know what it is about Michael Douglas. He's an absolute gem of an actor, isn't he? He's been in so many films. Pretty much every film he's been in has been a marvellous success. He has a gravitas about him. Sometimes he doesn't do much but look moody. I think you've said that. You said that in the green room before we press record. But this film messes with your head a bit, doesn't it?
I think this is why this film works so well. But you're right, it's not. People don't talk about it so much. So I'm so glad we chose it for today. It's this idea of typically when you watch a film, you are slightly ahead of the characters. So you know what's going on, and you want them to succeed. In this one, you are just as confused and lost as the character played by Michael Douglas.
Yeah, and it was interesting when I was thinking about this. I was thinking about all the films that Michael Douglas has been in, and if you think about it, a lot of the films that he's been in portray Michael Douglas as probably quite a rich character. You know, he's often married. He's often has a big house to live in, flash car, incredible career. The locations are very exotic, usually in big American cities, and then something happens to that character that totally unravels his life. So in Fatal Attraction, he obviously has an affair with Glenn Close, and she turns out to be a bunny boiler, and his whole life comes crashing down. In Disclosure, he's a VP in a tech firm, and he gets sexually harassed by Demi Moore, and as a result of that, his life starts to spiral apart. You could argue the same about Basic Instinct. There was the other film, what's it called, Falling Down, where he's the poor man on the way to work, gets caught in a traffic jam and ends up just losing his rag and shooting at people. And you could argue again, his life starts to fall apart. And in each of those films, there's a specific reason that you can see he's had the affair with Glenn Close. You know, Demi Moore has sexually harassed him. But in The Game, his life absolutely unravels catastrophically within the 2 hours of the film. But as the audience, we're not actually quite sure what the poor guy's done to deserve it, or even what is actually happening.
Yeah, because David Fincher knows what he's doing. I mean, as much as his career as a filmmaker, a feature filmmaker, started in the early 90s with Alien 3, which has mixed, reviews and kind of confused history. He's been doing video and documentary, music video, and documentary for a very long time. So he knows his craft. But also the writing. So what we have here is Michael Douglas playing the character of Nicholas Van Orton, who is a bit of a tormented soul. He's witnessed the suicide of his father. His father died at the age of 48, and this is his 48th birthday. He's alone. I can't be sure that he's lonely, but certainly he's alone. And he's trapped in those buildings. I think the cinematography you mentioned a moment ago, where wherever he goes, it feels like he's trapped into this architecture of modern times. It felt a little Kafkaesque to me. And his brother, played superbly by Sean Penn, comes along with a gift, a game that can make your life fun again, because his brother's saying to his older brother, you're boring, you turn into an old man and you may die like dad, very, very soon. So Michael Douglas, takes part in a game, but actually he does it in a very arrogant way. He thinks basically he's going to outsmart, the creators of the game, and suddenly his life turns upside down. But we, as the audience and the character, we don't know whether it's basically his brother who did a dirty trick on him. Is it because actually this organization is about ripping off rich people? Is it because he's making a mistake and actually putting the life of complete innocent people in danger? And you don't know until the very end.
No, and you don't know when the game starts, when he's actually in the game. Does he step out of the game from time to time? He interacts with all sorts of characters who are potentially part of what's going on, or as you say, may just be innocent bystanders. And we don't know as the audience whether, they are part of the conspiracy. And as you say, is it Sean Penn that's put this together? And I think it was David Fincher who said, there's this quote from Internet Movie Database where he says movies usually make a pact with the audience that says we're going to play it straight. What we show you is going to add up, but we don't do that. And it's just one of those movies that twists and turns. You're never quite sure where it's going to end up and what's actually happening. Now, that might frustrate the hell out of some people who watch it. I can understand that. But it certainly kept me on the edge of my seat, especially when I rewatched it.
And when we think about the storytelling, the character is in danger. I mean, mortal danger several times, which is why actually you do believe that it is this incredibly well organized scam to take away his fortune by this organization called the Consumer Recreation Services. So, by the way, Roger, if you ever think of a birthday present, don't give me something like this. I don't think I would manage so well, but. What is interesting for me and why I felt the movie was even more sinister, having watched it again more recently, is because in 1997, when this was made, we didn't understand technology, artificial intelligence, big data to the degree that we do today. But if you remember, the character spends almost a day in a kind of assessment center so that they can design the right game for him. And I wondered whether in there somewhere there were some early signals about what data can be used for.
Yeah, that's very interesting observation, Pascal. I hadn't actually thought of that, but you're absolutely right. They needed to assess him to be able to set the game up. Other things that we noticed was, it was an early-ish film where mobile phones were used quite a lot. And, the mobile phone that he has in his car is actually quite a big one. It wasn't quite the brick-shaped one that we might have seen in Die Hard nearly 10 years earlier, but this was still the era where phones were still quite chunky, and people were just coming to terms with them. And I just love that sort of retro, even though it isn't really that long ago.
But I think to your point, the movie doesn't feel old.
No,
it didn't feel like I was
at all.
watching an old 90s movies. I mean, we watched a few recently where you think, oh, the music is a bit 90s or the acting is a bit, wooden. This felt like something that could have claimed to have taken place in the early 2000s or later. And there's some really good twists and turns. And every so often you think you've got it, they throw something at you. There's a scene or something that he discovers himself when you go, no, I was wrong all along. This is not what is happening.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, there's a few faces that you recognise in the film. Sean Penn, as you've mentioned, the actress who plays the waitress Christine, she's called Deborah Kara Unger, and really good actress who I can only think of one other film that she's been in, and that was called Crash, which was a bit of a bizarre film that had Holly Hunter in it as well. It was people getting sexually turned on by car crashes, which is a bit bizarre. But I really like this actress, but I just don't think she ever became really a big star.
The one thing that I wish they wouldn't do in movies is to always bring a clown puppet. I mean, I just so I know there's a term for it, but I'm not a big fan of clowns. And what cleverly what they do is they tell him that he's been declined and that they're not gonna go ahead with the game, but in fact that is already the start of the game. And then outside of his house, he discovers on the kind of just outside the front door this kind of life-size puppet of a clown. and that looks so sinister. That was it for me. If,
Oh
if if
no.
if I'd been him, I would just found ring that hotline number and said that I'm out.
No, I think Trisha said exactly the same thing. As soon as the clown appeared, I'd have been out of there. Funny. I mean, we talked about Woman in Black recently, and again there was scary clowns in that as well. So it's definitely a motif that freaks people out. It's that smiley face, but the fact that they don't talk, but they seem to be looking at you. And of course, in this film, the clown was looking at him because that's where they hid the camera.
Yeah. So there was already some early signs of kind of using kind of mini technology to spy on people. So let's talk about the marketing, Roger.
Yeah,
Now, what
yeah.
is interesting, when you and I do film marketing, and we talk about the marketing, we mentioned the key elements of a typical campaign, and we kind of really rush through the reference to posters and teaser trailers and trailers because, frankly, they're not really that meaningful. But on this occasion for the game, the
Mhm.
best element of the marketing campaign was the teaser trailer, which is often something that is rushed even by the filmmakers themselves. But
Mhm.
this, to me, was the strongest element of the marketing campaign.
Yeah, it was a bit surreal, wasn't it? It wasn't scenes from the film. We had dialogue in the background with the characters, but the actual teaser itself was a wooden puppet being manipulated by somebody pulling strings, which actually is an extremely good analogy of the film itself.
And so you were literally all you could do was be drawn by the audio because there was little visual to distract you. I think the audio
Mm.
had been ever so slightly, produced to and pushed, so it was really clearly audible. But there was something about it that you were almost listening in, almost like a fly on the wall, to bits of conversation, and you couldn't quite make out what was going on. But clearly, the character Michael Douglas was in distress whilst this puppet was being manipulated. And then comes obviously the title of the game with the strapline "Gamers Wanted," or is that what they use for the official tagline?
Yeah,
Players wanted, yeah.
players wanted, and what do you get a man who has everything? Yeah, it's quite intriguing. Again, the film's intriguing because you're never really quite clear what's going on until right at the end. And I guess they started that intrigue build up right from the start when they were marketing the film early on.
So for me, that's almost the number one takeaway lesson for
Hmm.
for film marketing, which is where generally the teaser trailer is almost, substandard to the rest of the marketing campaign. It began the campaign in a strong way, and I do challenge ourselves as content creators whether we do enough with regard to creating the teaser and spend time on the quality of the execution. Because after that, the trailer was then released where you could see scenes from the film, but very cleverly still built on that intrigue and tension. So it wasn't as if they'd forgotten about the teaser trailer, and so the trailer becomes the main thing. It was a nice build-up. They did have at the time an official website, Roger,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
sadly no longer around. I do wonder whether they could leave those websites up just for people like you and I. I'm sure they couldn't afford it. A few pounds a month in hosting, just for historical value. What do you think?
I seem to remember it was a very good website, and again, it drew you into that idea of. I mean, I'm sure there was some sort of gaming element on it. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it did use quite a lot of the iconography from the film. Again, the aforementioned buildings and the color palette, and that feeling of being enclosed and trapped. I'm sure that was. Maybe I'm misremembering it, but I do remember that the website was interactive in some way, but it also had the feel of the film as well.
So for me, the other elements that we do mention a lot in film marketing is the extensive use of PR, which I think is
Mm,
always
mm,
overlooked in modern
mm.
times, and also making sure that as the director David Fincher made himself available for many interviews to explain, not to explain the movie to the point where it was revealed, what was happening, but just to kind of talk about his passion for storytelling, for crafting a story. But what they did very cleverly as well, Roger, is the movie takes place in San Francisco,
Yeah.
and the movie does showcase the city really well. So, of course, you're going to get the local PR bandwagon onto it as well.
So yeah, I absolutely agree. And my wife and I went to San Francisco for our 10th wedding anniversary.
Oh, really?
And there was a few places that I spotted in the film. Now, the hotel that Michael Douglas meets the Russian guy in, which has an incredible white facade, which almost looks like a Greek palace, is actually the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in San Francisco. And we stayed there for a few days for our 10th wedding anniversary, and it was absolutely beautiful, that hotel. And we were both sat there with it, and we always both looked at each other and go, oh, look, there it is.
So, Roger, this has been actually a great choice. Not the most famous movie of all times, perhaps not even the most famous movie for Michael Douglas and David Fincher, but actually for that very reason, I think it was worth talking about it. But also for me, what a clever, narrowly focused marketing campaign that we can all learn from.
Definitely. I think it's easy to blow the film, isn't it, in the trailer and give all the best scenes away, give away the story. And we often do that with our content. I frequently, with my own podcast, use the old, 60-second snippet with the wavy line, audiogram, I think they call them. And quite often that gives away an incredibly important part of the narrative. Maybe we should be thinking about how can we create total intrigue by doing something slightly different for our own trailers.
Well, thank you so much, Roger, for spending some time with me. This has been episode 37. Everyone, please leave comments, suggestions, and reaction in the usual places. Until the next one, make sure that your marketing is done right. I was Pascal Fintoni, and he was Roger Edwards. Bye for now.